Happy Friday, everybody! You're in for a treat tonight because we're silly stupid today, aren't we?
Hyper.
Hyper?
Hyper's a better word.
Hyper.
We're hyper
Yeah.
for Jesus.
Yeah, we're
which makes it all okay.
Yep.
So somebody's already turned it off. They
They're like,
turn this on and they're like, yep,
inappropriate.
No. Yep, nope, not happening, right?
Can't be happy.
But it's
No.
all about Ned, right? Because Ned challenged us to have joy and not happiness.
These people are like, who's Ned?
Right, so-
Turn to
Shield of
earlier
Faith.
today,
Yeah.
and the Shield of Faith, and that's who Ned is.
Yeah.
Then you at least know who we're talking about.
Yeah, so Ned challenged us and he said, listen, is it joy or happiness? And you were just like going way over
Overachiever mode.
yeah, like
you know.
you were killing it on joy and it was great.
Well, that's because you prayed for the Holy Spirit first, so I won't take credit.
He did. You know, the room changed when he prayed for that.
I'll say it wasn't
yeah.
me.
Yeah. No. We're going to give Ned and Jesus credit.
Yeah, Ned and Jesus, and I was just, this thing.
Jesus and that.
Okay, sorry. Right. So Ned, the producer in waiting, just said it's Jesus and then Ned.
Wait. There's no producer here because I have
The power.
The
Yeah.
power.
Yeah,
Right?
that's a
I'm the producer.
Sure, that's a He-Man thing right
So,
there. But
Andy's really excited, guys, and super giddy because we're talking about his favorite topic tonight, which is patience.
this is true.
He has lots of it.
I was telling you that I do have lots of it, like 1,200 pounds of it. Like I paid and prayed for patience, and God delivered me a horse named Patience.
Yeah, and that's about all he's got.
The rest of you have prayed for patience, and you get troubles.
Strife,
Yes.
torture,
people,
chaos,
in-laws, that kind of stuff.
in-laws.
Right? But me, I pray for patience, and I just have to pay for
And
it.
you just get a horse.
I just got a horse.
But he's also then just impatient, so I guess he just has to settle.
Do you know what's really unique
Accept
about my
it.
horse Patience? Is that she was a jumping horse that got injured, and so she actually has a limp, right? Which I am very impatient with Patience about, right? You get people on her and you forget that she has a limp, and it's really funny. The Patience has brought patience to my life.
It sounds like you really need to pay attention to what I'm going to read.
Let's read it. Let's get started so that the rest of the people watching aren't turning it
Okay,
off.
we're in James chapter 5, guys.
We might finish, or maybe not.
No way.
Okay.
No way. Because then we're
All
going
right.
to talk about prayer and healing and all that. And that's a whole, huge. That might be 2 days.
All right.
All right. Chapter 5, verse 7. Get ready. Be patient, therefore, brethren, unto the coming of the Lord. Behold, the husbandman waiteth for the precious fruit of the earth, and has long patience for it, until he receive the early and latter rain. But you also be patient. Establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord draweth nigh. Grudge not one against another, brethren, lest you be condemned. Behold, the judge stands before the door. Take, my brethren the prophets, who have spoken in the name of the Lord, for an example of suffering, affliction, and of patience. Behold, we count them happy which endure. You have heard of the patience of Job, and have seen the end of the Lord, that the Lord is very pitiful and of tender mercy. But above all things, my brethren, swear not, neither by heaven, neither by earth, neither by any other oath, but let your yes be yes, and your no be no, lest you fall into condemnation.
Yeah.
I love it!
Well, I'm glad. Now you can tell the people why you love it.
Why do I love it? Well, where should we start? Be patient, coming of the Lord. He is long suffering, early in the latter rain. Establish your hearts. Okay. Well, in the beginning, he's talking about being patient for the Lord to return, because that's what everybody was talking about and waiting for and all the things. And he's telling you, be prepared for the Lord to come, right? So while you're being patient, you have to make sure that you're ready for the Lord to come. But then he goes into that. So grudge not against another. Lest you be condemned. Behold, blah, blah, blah. Take my brethren and prophets who have spoken. I actually like him talking about them suffering in their affliction and being patient in that, because I think that's always how we feel when we talk about patience and we deal with patience. It's just patience equals suffering.
Right.
Because we're waiting for something good or something bad to be over or something to get here. And he talks about this and he says, it's counted count them happy which endure and suffer for the Lord. So I think that's a huge thing there, that like having patience and waiting for the Lord is huge, because you're trusting in that moment. It's like when we talked about like today, right? And not boasting about tomorrow. Like I think that fits very well with patience, because we have to, you can't be patient if you're just focused on tomorrow.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So I just think they go well together.
Well, they absolutely go together. And I love that what you just said, because Jesus said about, hey, don't worry about tomorrow, right? Which automatically means that I'm in trouble, right? Because I look at today as a setup for tomorrow, right? And so again, like everything about today is focused on like, let's make it right for tomorrow. And so James is saying, listen, when you get that way, right, when you get so heavenly minded that all you're thinking about is, I can't wait for Jesus to come back, can't wait for Jesus to come back, can't wait for Jesus to come back, well, now you're not focused on today,
Right.
like you said.
Right.
And so that's the problem. So part of that is it creates suffering, right?
Yeah.
When I'm not embracing
That wasn't even
today,
really suffering.
right? When I'm not embracing today, then I'm going to be in a mode of suffering, right? Like it's just going to happen.
Yep.
Right? I'm not paying attention to things today. I'm creating suffering, which is what waiting does, right?
Yeah.
But also, I think one of the areas that waiting really, really creates problems and is the thinking. Right? When I know that I'm taking a trip, right, next fall, I can either embrace every day until that trip, or I just spend all my time thinking about that trip, right? And the ups and downs that go with that trip, and that creates the problem.
Yeah, and I don't know. I just keep thinking about the fact that it is you're completely useless in today for the Lord. Like, and what if it doesn't come?
Yep.
Like, what if that thing never happens? Now, we have God's promises in certain things, and obviously the Lord is returning.
Yep.
But the Lord may not return while we're here.
Exactly.
Right? So, like, we can look at that. We can look at other promises, and it's like, okay, but God says, and what is it, Thessalonians, where he's like, talks about the busybodies,
Yep.
right? Like, don't be a busybody. Like, occupy until I come. Like, you cannot. I'm stuck in the boasting for tomorrow thing, because what you have is this moment. God promises you right now you have everything you need.
Right.
You have everything you need right now. Maybe not everything you want right now.
Might not be happy.
Yeah, there's that happy joy thing, right? Like, you might not be happy, but God doesn't ever tell you that he wants you to be happy. You know, that's not a biblical thing. That's a world thing where we've said like, oh, God just wants you to be happy. No.
See, happiness is so much about the destination. It's about the outcome.
Yeah.
Joy is about the process.
Well,
right?
and happiness is about you.
Exactly. So again, when the outcome and the destination are what I want, I'm happy.
Right.
Right. But there's value in the process, whether or not I end up being happy or not. Like, I am one of those weird people who loves to interview. I love interviewing because I get to meet people. And I get to see and I get to hear what's
That's
important
so funny.
to people.
I love it too. I used
Right?
to sign up for that when I was working in retail. I'd be like, oh, can I do it? Can I
Right.
do it? Can I do it?
But we get to know people, and when you're a real
It's
people
fun.
person, you love that kind of stuff. But I've interviewed for jobs and positions that I haven't gotten.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
And so again, am I happy about it at the end? No. But can I be joyful for the experience? Absolutely. Which ties into what James says about the farmer, right? See how the farmer waits for the precious fruit of the earth, being patient about it until it receives, right? The early and the late rains. So we know that in Israel, like, they planted, right? And when they planted, there was early rains, and then it doesn't rain.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden the plants are growing, and they might even look like they're withering a little bit and everything. But then there's this later rain that comes that finishes growing, and it spurs everything on, and it spruces everything up. And then all of a sudden you're ready to harvest. Yeah. But here's the deal. The farmer doesn't plant and then sit and do nothing and just watch the seed. Is it going to grow? Is it going to grow? Is it going to grow?
Right.
The farmer goes on to the next field and goes on to the next thing and prepares for the harvest and gets ready and does all these things. Sometimes when we're waiting for something from the Lord, whether it's Jesus himself or whether it's something that he's given us, sometimes we're waiting for it and we just sit and watch and wait and wait and wait and wait. with that comes a mental battle. With that comes the thinking.
Well, the enemy's like, ooh, prime time.
Yep,
He
because-
knows what's going on. He's watching you.
Yeah, and all the enemy has to do is throw in little doubts like it's not going to grow, Andy. It's not going to grow. It's not going
This
to
is
grow. It's
taking
not going to
too
grow.
long.
Right. And again, that means every voice we give power to, every situation we give power to, because all of the things that can affect it. Right.
Yeah.
I know people who have, like, they've heard from the Lord. So do you. And the Lord says, this is the job I have for you.
Yeah.
I know people who have gone through the whole interview process. They've gotten to the end of the interview process, right? And they didn't get the job.
Right.
And yet they are so sure that God has given the job. And then days later, weeks later, months later, the job comes open and they get it, right? So I think that that's important. My wife was signing up to teach, right, at a local school, the school that she teaches at now. She interviewed, and she got down to the second person, and then they picked somebody else, right? And we had prayed about it, and people had said, like, you know what, I really believe, like, this is where God has you. And it got down to the end of it, and she said, you know, like, I guess it's not true. I guess, like, this isn't happening for us. And actually took a science position in the high school, at the Christian school I was working at, for 6 weeks. And then out of the blue, a position opens up at the school. They call her back. She interviews. She gets the job.
Right.
So it wasn't that people were wrong.
Right.
It was we assigned a time to it. Like, these are the positions that are open, so this must be what's going on with this.
No, I love that you brought up that interview thing, like, in the beginning too, because like you said, there could be joy in the process, but like I keep thinking about, there should be learning in it.
Yeah.
Like, that's why there should be joy, is because God doesn't make you wait just for funsies. Like, he's not like, oh, you know, this is going to be great. I'm just going to torture you for a little while. And, oh, I'm going to let you know you're going to have it, and then I'm going to torture you for a little while. Like, maybe you need to learn to have more faith. Maybe you need to trust him more. Like, look at Abraham. I always go back to Abraham because I feel like 99% of our little lessons can come out of Abraham's life.
Absolutely.
Like, he didn't say he'd be 100 years old.
Right.
He just said, you're going to have a son. You're going to have a seed, right? Abraham just assumed it would be during, childbearing years, like most people would.
Yeah.
He didn't think, like, his wife would be past that and it would be, like, impossible by world standards. He was just like, oh, well, it's going to be now. Like,
It's going to go through the natural process of things. So,
but if you watch Abraham and, like, all the other mistakes he made out of lack of faith, like the lying over and over again, like, you can see, like, okay, maybe God used that patience period, right, that waiting, to be like, are you gonna trust me at some point? Like, all these things. Are you going to trust me? 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 Maybe he would have had a kid sooner
well, and it certainly is a true statement.
if he learned his lesson that God was trying to teach. Maybe he was just saying, like, you need to just trust me. You need to have faith in me, and then you're gonna get this. I didn't say when, because maybe when is negotiable.
Exactly. Well, and I think you're spot on. I think that we go back to the Promised Land incident, right, where the spies go out, they look for it,
Yeah.
and they don't have the faith. 10 of them don't have
Right.
the faith, and the rest of the people don't have the faith, and they don't get to go. They don't get to go across, right? They don't get to go across because they started grumbling against Moses. They started grumbling against the whole process,
Yeah.
right? And that's what James goes on to say in this whole context. Like, you need to be ready for the Lord. You need to be ready. You need to be anticipating this. But at the same time, then, don't be grumbling against each other, right? In the waiting, don't grumble against the waiting process or what God has for you. And by the way, sometimes grumbling can prolong the harvest, right? Because when we start grumbling, we start messing with things.
Right.
Right?
And
How
God's
many-
like, well, you're not ready.
It's funny because I, a few years ago, was planting my garden, and I assumed that the corn that I planted the week before that didn't come up, that the birds had just gotten it, or it just didn't come up. So I went back through, right, and started to make new rows and put the corn in. And I found in several places that it was germinating, it was going up, it just hadn't broken through the ground yet, right, when I had wanted it. If I had been a couple more days patient, so the real problem was that originally when I planted it too deep. It took longer for
So it was
the
growing
seed-
at just the same rate.
Exactly. It just didn't pop up through the dirt in the time that it needed to for me, right? So we look at that and said, then I tore it up, And then I had to wait extra days for the new corn to come up. And you look at that and you say, sometimes we do that. God's like, it's so close. Like it's right here. And then we tear everything up. And then we say, like, oh, I need to replant, rewater, because God's not growing. Right? It's the biblical concept that God's in charge of growth, period. We don't get to be that way. Whether it's our own seed, whether it's the seed that we planted out here, God is in charge of that, right? Happiness has me focused on, it's not growing fast enough, right? And when we see it, I'm happy. Joy has me focused on the process of, like, hey, I'm willing to let this play out and see what God does with it.
I'm stuck.
You're stuck. Good.
I'm stuck on this. You just created a whole nother little topic there with
there
the
you go.
whole, like, God's going at the same rate, but we dug too deep.
Yeah.
And we met, like, it's exactly what it should be, but we have altered it.
And again,
I think it's interesting. That's a whole other thing.
Well, and we've seen the problem. The problem is that a lot of times we're talking, and all of a sudden it becomes personal in nature. Isn't that funny? Or it becomes
Never for me.
Not personal for you, but like
Just
personal for the people watching.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Not for you either.
Definitely
Just those
for
guys.
Alicia, for those people who are watching with us.
Yeah,
right?
it's not personal for us.
For Ned.
It's
Ned left the room. He didn't
just
want
you.
it to be
Yeah,
personal.
he felt convicted immediately and just left.
And Carrie came in and she led too. So all the personal stuff is out. So we'll just talk about that for a minute.
It's all you guys, not us.
It's the problem, right? The problem with this Christian life is we just assume that everything is microwavable, right?
Oh yeah,
That
instant.
we assume that God is going to do things instantaneously, and he doesn't, right? A lot of times he loves the process, but sometimes God gives us a glimpse of the future, and we just think we get to go take it, right? Like, so however,
Like
it
Abraham.
doesn't matter, right?
Again, Abraham.
Doesn't matter how we get there.
Oh, I'm gonna have a baby. Well, let's do it right now.
Let's go get it. And God says, like let's do this right? Let's do this right, because God is so concerned about the masses. Like, I think of the story of Joseph, and I think of the fact that Joseph was given the dream of his future, right? And immediately, what's he do? He goes out, he tells his brothers, then he tells his mom and dad, right? And they just kind of like dumbfounded, like, wait, you think you're going to rule over us? Like, this is crazy, right? Type of thing. But his dad pondered it, is what it says, which is always a good thing. Ponder, you should probably
But
not
it was
talk
still
and
like,
ponder.
yeah, you should shut up. They
Right.
already hate you.
But when you look at this, what Joseph probably assumed meant, like, hey, somehow, somewhere, I'm the second youngest, but I'm going to rule over all. I'm going to get my family. And God's plan was so much bigger. It was, hey, if you go this route with me, I'm going to make you second in charge of the biggest kingdom in the world.
Yeah, you're just gonna really have a hard time getting there.
Exactly, but the hard time getting, and it was impossible. If you had said to Joseph, hey, you're going to go from here to here, he'd have been like, no connection points.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
But God's process involves a bunch of unlikely things that makes the connection points connect.
And how much did he learn?
And how much
Holy
did he
cow.
endure? He endured the hatred of his family, his brothers. He endured the hatred eventually of Potiphar, right? The hatred of all kinds of different things, like within this system,
Yeah.
before he got to the favor.
Right.
Right? So he endured before he got to the favor. And then once he got to the favor, it wasn't about ruling over his brothers. It was about saving his brothers.
No,
and
yeah,
family.
that's what I was gonna say. Like, look how much love and grace he had for his brothers. Like, through, like, I mean, it wasn't just like one cut and dry interaction with them either. Like, it was a lot of back and forth and Benjamin and all the things, and like, he had a lot of chances to really be like, no,
Self-destruct.
you guys need to pay, and like, this was wrong, and all this stuff. And we don't know, like, okay, there's no mention of Joseph being bad, right?
Right.
But like, we don't know what he was like before he was 17 with his brothers. Maybe they hated him because he was a turd, you know? We don't know. But like, after he went through all that stuff, we could see what he was.
Yeah.
You know, and maybe suffering and maybe being put under so many you know, punishments or whatever you want to call them, tortures or whatever, wrongfully made him just really feel for people, including his brothers, because yeah, they made those choices and they did those things, but I don't know. I think maybe all of that, like, it clearly built his character in a way that he was just able to forgive everyone.
Well, absolutely. And I love the fact that Joseph's patience and suffering were not because of him necessarily, right? It's the process that God had him through to develop him to be a leader. So again, we just want the end results, right? But God's saying, no, I want to develop you into the right husband, the right wife. I want to develop you into the right coworker. I want to the right parent, the right this, right? So it's not just about, yeah, I promise you get to be a parent. No, I want you to be the best parent you can be. Right? And by the way, I'm creating kids especially for you. So I need you to get this, right? I want you to be the best boss you can be. Why? Because I'm creating employees that need you, right? I mean, like, this is what God does. And so sometimes the suffering is the refining, right? Sometimes the suffering gets us to a place where now all of a sudden I can look back. I think sometimes God pulls us out of the ministry of secular work, right?
Yeah.
Because we need to learn some stuff and see some stuff, and then he'll put us back in, right, where we think it's going to be all about ministry, or we think it's going to be all about, but ministry is that. But he's like, listen, you've now learned how to be a godly boss, so let me put you back in here and let me work with you. So now that you see things differently, right? But sometimes suffering, getting laid off, getting fired, right? Sometimes suffering, like, hey, the loss of a child, all of those kind of things. The things that we don't want to imagine, the things that we are like, no, keep us, a loving God will keep us from all that stuff. Sometimes suffering causes us to be patient, which is what people need. Listen, you and I, we work in ministry, but all the people down here in Josh Ministries work in ministry in an official capacity ministry, not work, which is just as ministry. But a lot of times we need to be patient with those we're working with.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Because, again, they're coming to us hurt and beat up and broken and all these things, and we just keep expecting that they're going to snap a finger and get it right.
Yeah, that's not. We don't do that. I mean, you guys, we do.
Well, I pray and get a horse, so I don't know what you're talking about, but we don't, right? We don't get it either, right? And there's times where people have had to be patient with us. They listen to a whole bunch of nonsense.
Just a few times.
They've listened to a whole bunch of nonsense and then try to make some sense out of it for us.
Yeah. Well, tie in this last part for me.
Yep.
How he talks about your yes being yes and your no being no. How does that tie into all of this?
Yeah, so again, I think James kind of makes this kind of seem like it's an add-on, right?
It's like kind of separate.
Right, but it also ties in, remembering that there weren't little sections in this letter that James is writing.
It was just one big letter.
Right, so again, he's giving them encouragement, right? And what he's encouraging people to do in the first part of this is, hey, look to the coming of Jesus, right? And have your life in such a way that you're going to be doing what God wants you to do while you're waiting.
Yep.
Right. And then again, it's funny because in this whole patience and suffering thing, he ties in this little thing about like, hey, but above all, brothers, do not swear by heaven or earth or by any other oath. Let your yes be yes or your no be no, so that you may not fall under condemnation. In this whole thinking world, right? In this whole, hey, we want to change your thinking and you're going to become more patient through suffering and all this stuff. Be really careful about all your many words.
Yeah.
Right? Because what will happen is we always are going to come up and we want to take care of people and we want to do this and we want to be here and we want to be there and
making promises and
exactly. So
I swear to God.
Right. And we make promises all the time. Promises to change when we have no desire to change, when we don't think we're wrong. Right? Promises to be sorry when we're not sorry. Promises to do things when we're not going to do them. All of these things. Yeah. And James says, listen, what God wants you to be is simplistic in your thinking. Right? I love this because I tie it in on the fact that patient people, they talk way less than I do. Right? They don't have to talk themselves into something. They don't have to talk themselves through something usually. They're patient enough to just
let it
wait.
Happen.
Right? I'm going to wait. I'm not going to declare this way before it's time to declare it. I'm just going to sit back and enjoy the process and say, you know what? It seems to be going this way. right? God has promised us this ending that we know, and it looks like this, but you know what? At any time, God can swerve it. And so make it simple.
Yeah.
Like, yes, God has promised this.
Yeah.
Not all the interpretational stuff that goes with it.
See, I take this too as just like say what you mean and mean what you say, and
Amen.
just be the same. Just be you all the time, everywhere, and don't get caught up in extras and extra promises and overextending and people pleasing, right? Like the people that say yes to everyone because they're too scared to say no to anyone. And they really can't do it. So, like, their day's got 50 things in it, and they really only can do 10.
Yeah.
So then you really just hurt 40 people.
Yep.
You did damage. You didn't help anyone by saying, yes, I'll help you. You just did a bunch of damage. So it's like, to me, it's just like, your yes is yes, your no is no, for real.
Yeah.
And if you said it, you mean it.
Yep. Very simple. Which was,
That's it.
And by the way, people learn to love that, right? When so-and-so says yes, they just simply mean yes.
Right. You can count on me 150%. If I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it.
It's funny because in our little world, we're always attaching time to our yeses and nos. And I'm learning, like, why do I need to tell, like, if I tell somebody, yes, I'm going to be there today, why do I need to tell them what time? Because as soon as I park a time, I'm setting myself and them up for failure.
For fail, right.
Right? So I think a lot of times, we need to be aware of that.
Yeah.
So I love how James ties it all in and says, listen, patience and suffering, some of that is due to the fact that your yes isn't yes and your no isn't no. Sometimes I cause suffering for myself, especially mentally, because I feel like I've let somebody down.
Well, you probably have.
Because I've promised them something, and with lots of words and fanfare. Oh yeah, we're gonna do this, and it's gonna be great. It's gonna be wonderful.
And then it gets followed up with, "I'm sorry."
Yeah. Yep.
And could have just saved the whole thing by just not saying anything, or just saying no. I can't. I'm sorry. Wouldn't you rather me be honest than lie to you and say yes and all the things? It's a hot mess.
I'm with you. Creates a great problem. And then God has to sift through, back it all, and then say, like, okay, here's the deal. So sometimes my patience comes from the fact that God's having to go back through all of my junk, right? And say, like, Amy, let me undo this and undo this and undo this. And I think of that all the time with knots in my shoelaces, right? There's a time always when I know my shoelaces are untied. And if I just bend down and I just tie them, right, I'm good. But you know what? I don't take the moment. I don't do it. And then a little bit later, they're a mess. And I've got to spend a good amount of time trying to get them out while I'm complaining about it. It's a problem. Nobody else has that problem because you all wear Velcro or no shoelaces.
Velcro.
Right?
Are you assuming all of our viewers are older than you?
No.
There's no way.
I'm assuming that they're like Carrie and they have flip-flops on. Right? But you got to be able to hold with your toes, and I can't do that.
Gosh. Maybe we should get you some Velcro.
Do you know what I love about Friday nights is it has quickly become you, me, and other people's name. Like, people are now knowing that people are just walking in here and listening to us.
Yeah.
So maybe people are watching. They're like, I want to be part of Friday nights.
Yeah, well, come on down and bring Andy some Velcro shoes and some patience, but not in the form of a horse.
That's exactly right. Not a 1,200-pound.
He already has one of those.
That's right.
You want to talk any more about suffering and patience and torture?
I think we went full circle. We started talking about our friends. We ended up talking about our friends, which, by the way,
horses
is the epitome of patience and suffering.
Yes,
sometimes
having
as friends
like you.
That's exactly right. Some people who are watching this are going like, yes, knowing the two of you has brought me suffering and patience. So
no, because they have a pause.
Carrie's shaking her head.
Button.
Yes. That's it. Carrie and I are going to do a show next where we talk about why she's shaking her head
and why I'm her favorite.
We need to say goodnight now.
Okay, guys. Well, Andy's sad now, so he has to go. But we love you, and we hope that you have an amazing Friday night with Jesus, and that you have great patience. Great patience waiting for our next Friday night with Jesus next week. Have a great week, guys. We love you.